Morning, boys. Not nearly as tough as Drew and Brad. Last year, we got spoiled. We got a hot tub around New Year's, and it has been a lot of fun to be able to come and sit out here. Got a magpie calling over my shoulder. I've come out here almost every day. When I get home from work, this is where I usually go, or after I put the kids in bed. And it's super fun in the winter, especially when it's freezing cold and wind is howling, the snow's coming down, but it still lets me sit outside and have some peace. That's what my message is about today, is finding that peace. And so I'm going to start with a thought, and then a story, and then a scripture. So the thought is, most of the time, God speaks to us in a still small voice. These past couple of weeks, as Wade said, it almost feels like it gets harder to know what to share, because there's been so many good messages already. I definitely don't mind repeats, and I think there'll be more of them to come. It's fun to hear from different perspectives anyway. But my story is from this past week. As I've tried to think of what to share, I've had to take time away from the normal things in life, the busyness of life. And I've had to disconnect in order to reconnect with God. And so what I've tried to do, I'm always listening to podcasts or books, as I've talked about before, or anytime I have a moment of silence, it feels like I'm filling it with that on my drive, or even when I come out here and sit in the hot tub. But recently what I've tried to do is, at least for 5 or 10 minutes, and often even more than that, when I come out here, I just turn off the power to the hot tub, turn off my phone, just sit in silence and just look at the sky, look at the trees. Often it's at night, I can see the moon. And that's what I did this past week. As I was trying to think, I really wanted to be able to just sit and listen and meditate and think about God and about my life. And it was neat. As I sit here, I can hear different sounds that I normally don't notice. You can hear, the annoying sounds of traffic or a plane flying over, but also notice things like just the leaves blowing in the trees and the wind and the birds. And that's how it was for me the other night. I was sitting here and it was dark. It's winter. There's not much around, but I heard this little chirp overhead, and it got louder and louder, and then it kind of faded off. And some of you don't know this about me, but I'm a birder, which means I'm quite interested in the birds around me. And I got into that about 5 years ago or so. And I've had different times where I'm really into it, and then other times where I've backed off a bit. But the thing I love about it is just getting out in nature and being totally present, listening to every sound, often, usually alone. It gives you a lot of time to think and to be very present. And that, just the other night, as I heard that bird fly over, it reminded me of that peace that I feel when I'm out in nature. And hearing that little bird go overhead, I had to think, what was that? And I used to know, or I have known, the bird sounds pretty good, and I'm learning them. But even just this little bit of time of not being as active in my birding, I had to stop and think, what was that? And I opened my phone and I went to my bird app, and I'm pretty sure it was a Townsend solitaire. It won't mean much to you. It's a pretty gray looking bird, like a robin, but actually has a pretty nice sound, a nice song. And of course, that's what made me think about this message, that often God speaks to us in a still small voice. The scripture from Kings, chapter 19, talking about Elijah, the prophet, when he went up into the mountain, and talks about, the whirlwind, fire, rain, all these things that are powerful and loud, and he didn't see God in those things at that time, but he did in the end hear God's still small voice. And I think what the message that I thought of from that is that God's voice is there always. It's always around us. I think God's presence and power and influence is all around us. And often we need to take the time to to step back, disconnect, enjoy some silence, and give ourselves a chance to feel His influence in our lives. And I think when we do that, it allows us to be closer to God. So that's a message this week that, as you know, most of the time, God speaks to us in a still small voice. Have a great week, boys.